Charleston Waterkeeper was founded many years ago to protect and restore Charleston's waterways for our community. Today, I talk one-on-one with Executive Director Andrew Wunderley for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Andrew Wunderley, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me again.
Oh, I appreciate it greatly. Needless to say, you're the Executive Director of Charleston Waterkeeper, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization founded in 2009 to protect, defend, and restore the health and integrity of Charleston's waterways for people and nature. So let me ask you, what's new? What's now with the Charleston Waterkeeper?
Oh, well, it's summer, and so that means everybody's in the water, enjoying the water, whether it be paddling or fishing or surfing or swimming or sailing. And so we do a lot of bacterial water quality testing this time of year, and that's meant to let folks know when and where it's safe to go swimming. And so you can see us on the water just about every Wednesday this time of year, and we have the results published for folks on Friday morning. You can get that on our social media channels, but also if you want to go to our website and sign up for the email alerts, you can do that there. And so what we're after is we're trying to answer the question, is it safe to swim? And unfortunately, a lot of times it's not. And so it depends on whether it's been raining or whether it's been flooding. In those instances, water quality testing can show some really high bacteria levels that, we're talking about things that can get you sick from recreational contact. So it's important for folks to know before they go.
Oh, absolutely. So how many testing samples have you all taken thus far?
Oh, geez, that's a good question. So let's see, we started in May. We've done, we're about a little less than halfway through the season. So we're sitting right about 200 or 250 or so samples this year already. So we do 20 different sites every week, May through the end of October. And so it adds up pretty quickly. It also costs a lot. We're able to do the work cheaply because we have a good partnership with the College of Charleston. But if we had to purchase, it costs about $50 or $60 a sample to get them analyzed. But we're able to control costs through our partnership with the College of Charleston.
Wow. Okay. Analyze. So what exactly are you analyzing when you get these test results, Andrew?
Bacteria. So we're trying to answer the question about how much bacteria is in that sample. And when bacteria is present above 104 colony forming units per 100 milliliter, you assume that the disease-causing pathogens that are present in the intestines of warm-blooded animals are also present. And so it's an indicator of your risk of illness with recreational contact.
What exactly is that risk of illness right now?
Yeah. Well, last week, right before the 4th, we had some really low results. So that risk of illness was pretty low. But some good news, right? And, after rainstorms and floods, for instance, we might see bacteria levels that are maybe 10 times the state standard. So that suggests in those instances, you'd see really, really high risk of illness.
And of course, yesterday, I got caught in it myself riding this bicycle right here next to me. But I got caught in it laid down for it 5:30 yesterday, and it developed some flooding after that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, you go for it.
Yeah, I was going to say, this time of year, rain is so hit or miss. It might rain in Mount Pleasant and
Right.
and not in North Charleston, or it might, rain in North Charleston but not downtown. And so, it's really important for folks to pay attention to the data because the data will reveal that risk, not just the rainfall.
What other hidden data are you and your team looking for right now when you see these test results?
Oh, great question. We do a lot of water quality testing work off the boat, and we're doing not just bacteria, but we're also doing water clarity and color, which can be a measure of how much nutrients are in the water and how healthy the ecosystem is overall. We're also have a partnership with the Grace Marine Lab over at the College of Charleston. And so they are testing some samples for phytoplankton. And you can tell, we know what the normal distribution of phytoplankton species are. And you can tell if that distribution of species is out of whack a little bit, it suggests that there could be bigger problems in the harbor watershed system. And so it's important to keep tabs on those things. We also are building a biobank of samples for MUSC that will actually be tested for the DNA from pathogens. Things like tuberculosis and cholera, and some other things that can really get you sick. But we also do a lot of water quality testing that doesn't involve the boat and involves what we call community scientists. And those are volunteers that we've trained up to go out into the community to take water quality samples for us. And they're sort of a early warning network, kind of our eyes and ears out in the community about water quality. And so we have roughly 40 different sites that our creek watchers test every month, and they do temperature, salinity, dissolved oxygen, clarity, and pH. And those are like the vital signs of a river or a creek. And you will see really quickly how healthy the system is by measuring those vital signs on a regular basis. We also deploy community scientists for our microplastic monitoring work. And we have a group of folks that are trained up to collect those samples, but also a group of folks that are trained up to do the analysis in our office. And I think one of the things we're most excited about right now is we're expanding our space to build a community science lab. And so we'll have a dedicated space for those volunteers to come in and do that work with the microscopes and sort through the samples and do the analysis work. And so it's really exciting for us. We're doubling our available space for those volunteers, and we're really excited to be able to support that work.
Now, with that microplastic work, Andrew, will you all test these particular issues in certain locations, or the same exact testing site location that you use for the other testing sites?
No, we some of the sites are the same, but some of them are different. And so really what we do is we look for good public access. So the data has a high degree of usability and relevance for the public, right? If we're testing water quality at the places where you're swimming or where you're fishing or where you're interacting and enjoying the water, that gives the data a higher degree of usability for the public. And so we try to concentrate in areas with public access. But moving on from those areas, we also try to put several sites in one creek or one river system so that we can get a good picture of the health of that system and how it's behaving over time. And so it's a little mixture of those two parameters when deciding where to put water quality testing sites.
Well, thank you for that clarity. I really do appreciate that.
We've got a good map on our website too. Yeah. Folks can see all the different areas where we're testing and what we're testing for. It's called our Water Watch map. So folks can go to charlestonwaterkeeper.org and then look for that map there.
Speaking of that map, Andrew, what are the hot spots that you and your team are constantly keeping an eye on right now? What are those trending hot spots?
Oh, right. Well, the big one this year and over the last couple of years has been Philbin Creek in North Charleston. And there's a beautiful park right at the mouth of Philbin Creek where it meets the Cooper River called Hendricks Park. And it's right under the Don Holt Bridge. There's a nice little boat ramp there to get John boats out, a lot of people fishing and crabbing. Unfortunately, it has some of the highest levels of bacteria that we've seen in our sampling. And so we've built up a big data set for that site, and that data is all with the Department of Environmental Services right now. And so we're expecting what's called a TMDL cleanup plan to be issued here really soon. And so that'll identify all the different sources of bacteria to the watershed and then put a cap on the amount of bacteria that's allowed to be discharged. And then we can start to work backwards with the folks that are responsible for it to make sure it gets cleaned up and folks can safely use and enjoy that park and that creek.
And how much is that allowed to actually discharge right now?
Oh, geez. Yeah, there should be no discharges of bacteria to the creek, but unfortunately, it's probably a combination of some outdated infrastructure and septic tanks, and then also wildlife waste and pet waste. I mean, those are the most common sources of bacteria. But in areas like Philbin Creek, where we see persistently high levels of bacteria, we always look to the infrastructure because your infrastructure is constantly working, right? And so if you have a sewage leak or an overflow that's running, those can be kind of chronic and leaking all the time. Or if you have a septic tank that's malfunctioning, it can be leaking all the time, having a constant bacteria discharge to the creek. And so we expect to find some of that as the work progresses, but also, Philbin Creek has quite a bit of wildlife and green space around it, believe it or not, and so we'd expect to find some bacteria sources from wildlife as well.
Wow. You talk about those septic tanks, and obviously we've had issues with that
Mhm.
in Shem Creek and other locations in the past. Do you see that uptaking as well?
So, yeah, the unfortunate thing about septic tanks is we've got a lot of septic tanks that were installed, like, let's say, in the 60s and 70s. And then what we're seeing now is kind of a new wave of septic tank permits and a new wave of septic tank installations. But these new ones are a little different, right? It used to be, a septic tank got installed, in a neighborhood where, houses were on half an acre, maybe even in some instances more. But now we see as many as 3 houses per acre. So, in that instance, your yard is essentially your septic tank drain field. And you see these dense clusters of septic tanks servicing these neighborhoods that are way out and far away from existing public services, existing public water and sewer. And so that dense, the dense congregation creates a cumulative impact from those septic tank drain fields that can really damage groundwater. So folks that are using wells or can contaminate nearby surface water. So can make oysters unsafe to harvest and really cause high levels of bacteria in nearby waterways.
Whoa. And I'm thinking right now because I've done some interviews with a lot of the, elected officials about that,
Mhm.
particularly in the settlement communities, Mount Pleasant, and over here
Right.
on James Island, unincorporated James Island.
Yep.
Where else do you see that uptaking right now?
We're seeing it up in the Ondaw area. So where there's big tracts of land to be developed, you have a lot of out-of-state home builders, that are kind of investment or hedge fund backed. Well, let me back up there. The large out-of-state home builders that come into the community, come into our communities, and will build a neighborhood and then leave and go to other communities and do the same thing. And so, they're looking for cheap land. They're looking to pack as many houses on that land as can be built. And traditionally, not having access to water and sewer would have prevented that kind of development. But nowadays, the state is permitting these tanks to be installed in really dense clusters, which is problematic. And then kind of moving on and leaving the homeowners and local communities to deal with the impact of those tanks when they begin to fail.
Wow. So that's a lot of information right there, too.
Yeah.
And I want to get back to that in a second. Well, let me ask you this then.
Yep.
How many of those tanks are being installed in some of these locations right now?
Yeah. So we see typically you see, neighborhoods at about 200 homes a clip, and each one of those homes would need an individual septic tank. And so, we're not talking about one septic tank on an acre or one septic tank on a half acre. We're talking about 200 septic tanks jammed into a really small, tightly clustered neighborhood. And so that's a particular problem. And I think what's especially troublesome about it is, if you look at James Island Creek and Shem Creek, the state has come through with funding in a number of instances to help combat septic tank pollution in those creeks watersheds. But it's creating the problem, with the other hand, by issuing the permits to allow these new septic tanks to be installed in dense clusters. And so, what we'd like to see is sort of consistent permitting and consistent, and consistent. We'd like to see, a consistent set of regulations that prevents the problem from happening in the first place, right? It's much cheaper and easier. It's cheaper, easier, and more efficient to prevent the pollution on the front end than it is to try to fix it on the back end. And so preventing these tanks from ever going in the ground in the first place is the best way to deal with the problem.
This might be a silly question, Andrew, but with that funding that the state is providing,
Yeah.
will they somehow give you all somebody to do some study on this?
No, the money, and rightly so here in this instance, the money should go to extending sewer lines and getting people connected. And so, that's where we'd like to see the money sent.
Okay.
Or excuse me, that's where we'd like to see the money spent. If folks have septic tanks and they're malfunctioning, that's not only a problem for the nearby environment and nearby water quality and habitat quality, but it's also a health issue for the homeowner that's having to deal with a malfunctioning septic tank. I mean, we've heard everything from folks that, whenever there's a rainstorm or a flood, their septic tank is backing up into the house, or it's washing out into the nearest creek or marsh, or, in some instances, even in dry weather, they're failing and just, kind of discharging raw sewage into the backyard. I mean, those are really serious health issues that need to be dealt with. And so we'd like to see all the funding spent, towards helping those homeowners and helping those homeowners connect to sewer. I mean, especially in a time of a changing climate and rising sea levels, septic tanks are becoming less and less useful in our coastal areas, right? There's not enough soil that isn't saturated with either rainwater or tidewater to be able to treat the effluent from a septic tank. And so, we see, the most resilient solution and the one that's best for public health and the one that's best for water quality and habitat quality is going to be a well-managed, well-maintained, well-functioning sewer system.
Wow. Going forth, Andrew, and you know this is just like as well as everyone else, that Charleston is growing by the
Yeah.
pounds by the day. What's actually best for Charleston's health system and the water quality in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, boy, big question, Quintin. Big question. I think if we can grow and develop in a way that respects local water quality, I think we will have really accomplished something. And so there's so much good thinking and engineering and activity around how can we build in ways that hold stormwater, hold on to floodwater. How can we build in ways that are more resilient to allow that water to infiltrate and not run off dirty and polluted? There's a lot of good design thinking about that, a lot of good engineering thinking about that. And building a resilient community means building a community that mimics the natural relationship between land and water, right? We need to allow our community to flood and unflood with a minimal impact on public health and environmental health. We need to allow our community to flood and unflood with a minimum of impact on our daily commutes, our livelihoods, our works, our work, our family, our children. If we can figure that piece out, we will do really well. I mean, and it's really important that we do this through the lens of what's right for local water quality and what's right for our rivers and creeks and harbor. Because if we do what's right by them, we will do right by the entire community.
Oh man, and I wish I had more time to talk to you, but I'm definitely running out of time, unfortunately.
We
But
can
I
do
hope,
this again sometime.
oh, absolutely, yes, absolutely. Well, you know what? We'll come back, at the end of summer and do a recap on all of this.
Yeah, see where we're at.
And there you go.
Uh,
Well, Andrew Wunderley with the Charleston Waterkeeper, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Close Ups.
oh, thanks so much for having me, Quentin. It's always great to talk with you.
Likewise.